Welcome back to another episode of Can I Get a Witness? I'm Dr. Tyrone Ellis. When we left off of our last episode, the church was going through a transitional period dealing with the false teachings that had crept into the church called the secret knowledge movement, or what we better to understand today as Gnosticism. As a reminder, Gnosticism was the belief that the physical world is evil and that only secret spiritual knowledge can free a person from the physical world. And as the church leaders were dealing with that aspect of that teaching, then a young man by the name of Marcion actually piggybacked off some of the Gnostic movement mixed with Christianity and started teaching false doctrine that was catching on in the Roman churches before the fathers were able to put that fire out as well. So then they had to go back to the drawing board and ask the question, how does the church protect the authentic and the sacred teachings of the apostles in the eyewitness account of our risen Lord Savior Jesus Christ? And that's where the church developed what we call today overseers or caregivers, or the Christian, or better known today as the succession of elders or the priesthood of overseers. Now, coming into the 3rd and the 4th century, the church had experienced some ups and some downs. And as a reminder, the church was experiencing persecutions from the Roman Empire. So, as a matter of fact, in the year 247 AD, the Roman Empire, or the city of Rome itself, had turned 1,000 years old. And the citizens of Rome had set out to celebrate this grand occasion, which went on for about 3 days or 3 nights. Most historians compare this celebration to a New Year's Eve and a Mardi Gras celebration mixed together in one big party. Can you imagine that? But because this party that they were celebrating, Rome was actually celebrating their pagan gods of their state religion. And the Christians had refused to take part in the celebration, which now had caused a real big issue. You see, because after the celebration was over, Rome was hit with a plague. And the Romans wondered if the Christians had something to do with it by refusing to take part in their festivities, because now maybe they have angered the gods. So, to remain in the good standings of the gods of the Roman Empire, the Emperor Decius launched an all-out persecution against every Christian community. So, Decius, he died in 251 AD. Therefore, the persecution period was short-lived. However, a new emperor came into power in 284 AD by the name of Diocletian. And Diocletian, what he did when he came into power, he divided the empire in order to maintain better control. You see, Diocletian, he had what was called the Eastern Empire, and he divided with the Western Empire. And Diocletian, he was the emperor over the Eastern Empire, and he had a co-emperor over the Western Empire. So Diocletian also had an assistant by the name of Galerius, who noticed that the Christian soldiers, because you did have Christian soldiers in Rome, they were more loyal to Jesus Christ than they were to their commanders. So Diocletian retired and Galerius took over as the emperor. But Galerius, what he wanted to do, he wanted to rule the whole empire. Again, he didn't want to have a split empire between Eastern and Western. He wanted to rule the whole empire as one. So what he did is he set out to kidnap the Western co-empire's son, who was named Constantine. So in 305, Constantine's father became critically ill, and Constantine's father was the co-emperor of the Western Empire. So Galerius felt some kind of way for Constantine, so he allowed him to go see his father in his illness. Now, when Constantine's father died, Constantine demanded that he be recognized as the co-emperor in his father's place of the Western Empire. Now, Galerius, he probably would have challenged Constantine in this situation, but he was struck with a fatal sickness. Therefore, he did not fight Constantine to become the co-emperor of the Western, um, and so Constantine became the co-emperor of the Western. But then there rose up a new emperor in the Eastern by the name of Max. So now both Constantine and Max were fighting for complete control of the Roman Empire. And this is where the Christian story, or excuse me, Christian history takes a turn for the better. The day before Max and Constantine were to battle, Constantine prayed to the gods, or they said he prayed to the god. The story was told that he looked at the sun, and they said that Constantine saw what was something like a cross and the words, "By this sign you will win." And it was also stated that that same night that Constantine had dreamed that Jesus Christ himself commanded him to place a Christian symbol on his shields for his army. Now, what Constantine did, name, and in the Greek, the first letter of Christ's name looks like the English letters XP. So that's the symbol that Constantine put on every soldier's shield, was the letters XP. So the next morning, Constantine and his soldiers, they chalked those letters on their shields. And Constantine and his army triumphantly defeated Max and his army. So, speed it up to a year later, Constantine had issued an edict, which was called the Edict of Milan. And this allowed Christians to worship openly as they desire without any type of persecution coming from the Roman Empire. So it seemed like in Constantine's mind, Christ had now become his personal savior. And the cross, once an emblem of Jesus Christ's death, became to function as Constantine confirming power. And that's the reason why we use the cross today. Now, Constantine then granted the church leaders, who were commonly called priests, widespread favors. And the Christian church had now begun to emerge as a protected group and soon to be noticed as the Roman religious power. Now, well, one thing that Constantine was known for was for keeping things unified. He wanted unity in his empire. And so because of that, he also wanted the state religion also to be unified as one religion. And because there were different theological ideals of who Jesus was in relation to God the Father, Constantine called together all the church leaders in 325 AD to a place called Nicaea, which is modern day Turkey, and they worked out a statement of faith which became known as the Creed of Nicaea. The church statement of faith was updated to include Jesus as God and the phrase "one essence with the Father." So now, in closing, between 300 and 400 AD, Christians had gained something that the church did not experience from the beginning, and that was peace and power. So the church began to grow more rapidly than ever before. But the people that were joining the Christian movement, they were, they had their spiritual best by trying to gain the goodwill of another deity or another god. And others were joining the church just only to improve their social status. It was at this point that the people began to identify the church with earthly institutions instead of the invisible community of true believers. So it was easy to get caught up in what they could count and the institutional aspect of the church becoming more important than the gospel that the church was built upon. Sounds somewhat familiar now, doesn't it? So, in our next episode, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about how the Christian powers began to grow. And I'm going to introduce you to this dude by the name of Muhammad. And how did the Muslim religion begin to grow and power at the same time that the Christian religion was beginning to experience its power in worldwide as a worldwide religious organization. So until then, be blessed, and I'll see you again on our next episode of Can I Get a Witness? God bless you, and I'll see you next time.